All right.
Heard it.
I'm going to hit play. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Here we go.
Welcome. No,
I'm going to have to give you a signal.
Welcome back to the Fire You Carry podcast. Today, we have our guest, David Hoy, from the Great White North of Canada. Dave, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Before we get too deep into who you are and where you are, because we are going to have you explain that for our primarily American audience who really just knows Canada as a giant landmass above us. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, when you first told me where you're from, I got on Google Maps. I looked it up because I'd never heard of it before. But we got to talk real quick about how we met, how we connected. It is a weird coincidence that we just had some other Canadians on, completely unrelated to you, but that you will be our second or third really Canadian guest, which is just, I mean, it's rad, but not something that we planned. Anyway, you had reached out via the Fire You Carry Discord to see if Kevin or I were going to be at the Hume Lake First Responders Conference. And awesomely enough, my wife and I were up there and you and I got to hang out, which was awesome. We had some great conversations and, you know, unfortunately, like all things like that, it's too short and there's not enough time, but it was super fun to get to meet you. And I did want to throw that out there just for the rest of you listening to the podcast. Apparently all you have to do is send us a Discord message and the next thing you know, you're a guest on the podcast. So something to consider. That's not a promise, by the way. But Dave, tell us, where are you in the world right now?
So I'm currently in the suburb of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
Nice.
And right now it's a little bit overcast outside. Yesterday was a beautiful, I mean, in your language, 70 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
The next couple of days, we're going back to sub-zero, expecting 2 to 5 inches of snow.
Yikes.
But the following week, it's right back up to 70 again.
What does that translate to? So do you have to frequently jump between Fahrenheit and Celsius? Like, is that a conversion
No, I'm just
you guys
doing
do all
that
the
for
time?
you guys and your
You're just
listeners.
being kind to us.
That's right.
We have no idea.
So what is that in Celsius?
About 20 degrees Celsius.
That sounds
and
cold.
about 10 centimeters of snow.
Man, centimeters.
Well, I thought we'd segue this because you had talked to both Nole and I about some really cool peer support stuff that you guys are doing up there with Edmonton. And I thought we might need to check on you because coming from the silver medalist country of Canada, you guys probably needed quite a bit of peer support after we won the gold. Sorry, I had to bring it up, Dave.
Oh man, you know, a lot of tears shed. You guys are big rivals for sure. And I don't know how many years in a row we won gold.
Yeah,
all of
completely dominated us forever.
Yeah.
But we had some of our NHL guys this year, so it was great.
It's almost like that little brother, big brother syndrome. You know, eventually little brother kind of catches up and big brother feels sorry for him maybe and kind of lets him have it. Gotta let him have a win.
It's fair.
It's fun.
My kids are really into baseball and we're hoping, you know, this year with the World Baseball Classic, Canada had a chance and got in there. We had that little bit of hope. We thought maybe we could get you guys back on the baseball side of things, but didn't pan out.
I think we got smoked too, though, didn't we? Yeah.
No, you lost, but Venezuela, I think, got you guys.
Yeah, that's right, the Venezuelas. But then we took over their country for that. Yeah. But you know, I thought we could jump in. I thought it was kind of cool because I'm in the peer support realm. Obviously, what we do with the podcast and the Fire Up program is very much peer support, just on a different level. The program is very intimate, and we kind of, you know, we get right into it, like some of our things that we've struggled with, traumas from the past, and how we can move forward. But yeah, Noel had shared with me quite a bit of stuff that you're doing, and I want to maybe see how you got started in that. And I know you said you've been with the department for over 20 years, but yeah, how did you see that kind of fruition and what you guys are doing up there?
Well, I think what has resonated a lot with me lately has been, you know, peer support seems to now or has gotten a bit of a stigma over the years with some of the old sort of SISM approaches and, you know, bringing everybody to the kitchen table, and sort of making it almost mandatory, and left a lot of bad taste in guys' mouths, and is very reactive. So there's a sort of twofold, and what I was hoping to talk to you guys about today is a bit about how to process trauma in a better way, and also about I have a different nonprofit that I'm involved with that is all about proactive peer support. And so the little shout out for that is called We See You Peer Support. And I believe we're starting to partner with, or we have partnered with Next Rung.
Oh, right on.
With regards to proactive peer support. So a little bit about myself real quick. Been with the department 20 years, like I said. I'm on the peer support team. I also do what's called reintegration, and I was part of our technical rescue team for 10 years. I also serve as one of the lead members of the Firefighters for Christ chapter. Cool. We've been running that for about 4 years now, and looking forward to putting on a marriage conference, the first ever Canadian Firefighters for Christ marriage conference, coming up May 23rd.
Rad.
So lots of different kind of things going on in the mental health area, and just like really care about our members and making sure that they're taken care of. What really got me going down the road of like trying to change peer support or looking at it in different ways, this reintegration training that I got. What reintegration essentially is when we got a member that's on WCB or long-term, it's a matter of helping them get back to a place of health to make a decision on whether they want to return to work or not. And part of that reintegration training when I first got it was through our police service. Actually, we did a week-long in service with them, and actually Edmonton Police Service is probably the gold standard in the world of reintegration. They've created this program that has proven to be like remarkably successful. Like it's incredible how successful they are. And so we sort of tried to copy a little bit of what they're doing and try to make it more fire specific. So for example, what they'll do is on an officer involved shooting, what they'll do is they'll take everybody at ground zero when that trigger gets pulled, whether it's the bad guy pulling the trigger or the good guy pulling the trigger, and they get put on short-term administrative leave, just 24 to 72 hours. And then they'll bring those members back in to meet with their reintegrators, and they'll do what's called a whiteboard. So they'll walk through the entire day, walk through the event, and while they're telling the story, one guy will be writing sort of all the things that are kind of coming up and sort of curious for themes, and then the other guy is kind of watch for body language and cues, and then they'll go back with the member and sort of circle back and on the whiteboard what's in front of them and see if there's any sort of themes or things that stood out, and talk to the member then about hotspots. Like, are there some things where that person felt, like their life was in jeopardy, or they witnessed serious harm to somebody else? And then from that point, they kind of are able to divert them into like a short-term process where, 72 hours later, they're kind of back to work, or into their more long-term process. And so one of the things that they did over the course of developing that program is they did a self-study on their program and found that over a 4-year period, they had a 75% reduction in long-term disability and workers' compensation claims for mental health.
Wow.
So a big, big number. What it looks like up front is that short-term administration has to commit to, bringing in overtime staff to cover off for those people that are put off for that short period of time. But in the back end, the long-term, their department is saving millions of dollars in having these people still being at work, and then also the benefit of their members being healthy and being able to process it healthier. So essentially what we've done is, or what we're trying to go with our reintegration is that we don't really have that short-term setup. We're trying to get there through our peer support program. What the long-term piece though, so I do a bunch of work with guys in that, and essentially, you'll go through that first initial period where we kind of assess it, and then, you've gone to a clinician now and you determine, okay, these are the hot spots. This is the thing that you need to work through, or the issue you need to work through. And then I'm going to help you by a process called prolonged exposure therapy. And so an example that I use for everybody, if I'm going to describe this, is let's say that you guys go on a run and it's comes in a structure fire, and it's ends up being, there's a fatality in a blue house, and it was an older lady that passed away. And let's say you grew up in a blue house and your mom still lives in that blue house that you grew up in. And so for you, that call kind of seems to strike a chord, or it kind of gives you a traumatic stress incident where now you might personalize it, because it's like, oh, that could have been my mom, right? That could have been me. That could have been my old house. And so what the reintegration process does is, or the prolonged exposure therapy process does, is I sort of work with guys, and we'll basically titrate or like microdose that trauma until you bring their distress down. So when they first tell you about the call, their distress, it's called a SUD score. Have you guys ever heard of that?
No.
It stands for subjective units of distress. So if you're reliving that, or you're having those nightmares, those flashbacks, it's like 10 out of 10, right? You're way up there. It's like you're right back in it. And then as we kind of microdose this trauma, we try to bring that SUD score down and down and down and down until now it's just an event that happened in the past. It doesn't change that it was a negative, horrible, awful, shitty event, but it's now something that happened rather than occupying your every day to day. So what that looks like is we might start by just talking about blue houses, and then maybe we'll look at a picture of a blue house, and then next we'll watch a video showing a blue house, and then maybe it's driving past a blue house, and then maybe we stop, and then maybe we walk past, and then maybe we go up and ring the doorbell and see if the old lady inside is still there, right? But the deal is, like, each time you do it, you're checking in with a member. Where is that level of distress? You never want to get them up above sort of a 6 or 7, and then you kind of just slowly work your way down, down, down. And as that micro dose kind of keeps happening, now they're building up their resiliency to it, and they're recognizing, maybe this is a horrible thing that happened, but it's not. At the end of the day, recognize it wasn't your mom and it wasn't your blue house. Like, they're still there, right?
Now, are they assigned like specifically one guy like you that would walk them through this process, or is it a team on the peer support team, or is it a clinician? How does it work, like, tangibly?
So it's a team of, as far as like, I'd be the only reintegration facilitator working with a member. Okay. And then I work in cohort with their clinician, whether it's a counselor or a psychologist or whatnot. And then, or if there's a WCB gets involved, that sort of their care team. But yeah, I'm going to walk with this guy sort of start to finish. And the goal for that is to get them back to health. Not necessarily back to operational, but back to where they can make a decision. Do I want to continue on in this career, or do I want to go some other way? But to get them out of that place where that fear or that pain that's been crippling them, and get them back to a place of health. So that's the reintegration side of things. And then, the peer support side of things is, if we circle back to that EPS model, that first 24 to 72 hours, that's the part that I really feel like we can get a whole lot better at. And so would love to share some of that stuff with you guys. Yeah. I think, I listened to that one episode you guys did with Evan Hallquist, and he has that bad night protocol.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Like, what he's got in there, a bunch of those things are really good. I worked last night. I'm working tonight. I did that this morning. I looked back on that episode and I took notes, and I decided I'm going to just bang it out and see how it feels.
Love it.
So got home from my night shift, jumped in the cold tub, got out, did some breathing, went in, did some foundations training in the gym, hit a quick kettlebell workout, then on with the day.
That's great.
Proper.
Yeah, feeling good. Went and got a haircut, right? No?
I love your haircut, by the way. I meant to say that earlier.
Thanks. So as far as in that first 24 to 72 hours, that's where we can make a huge difference with our members. The first two caveats, though, which are really tough, or let me just back that up. So right now with our department, we're still working through the aspects of how do we make this fully happen. But the administration and dispatchers can tell you what are the top 10 incident types that typically lead to a traumatic stress injury. And so what we're trying to do is, because we don't have officer involved shootings, we're fire, we're trying to get basically peer support auto dispatched to the stations so that they're either en route or waiting outside the hall when the crews return from the call. And then we're in there, and it's not so much about come to the kitchen and sit and let's have a chat. It's more so, I'm here as a resource. If you guys want to chat about anything, I'm just here, right? If you don't want to chat, if you want to go and hit a workout or go to bed or have a shower or something, by all means, go eat, whatever you got to do. I'm just here to hang out for a couple hours, and I'm going to remind them of a few things that they probably already know, and just be there as a resource. So that's kind of where we're progressing to. But the first two caveat things to challenge, or that are challenging in the fire service, is recognizing that in that first 24 to 72 hours, if we have either caffeine or alcohol on board, stimulants or depressants, how our brain encodes trauma is vastly different than if they're not on board. And obviously in our culture, caffeine and alcohol play a big part, right? We have a tough call in the middle of the night.
Throw the nicotine in there.
Well, yeah.
I'm sure that's
I don't know
helpful.
I don't know what.
That's kind of a trip, because when we do peer support, the first thing we do is literally brew a big old pot of coffee.
You gotta have a cup of coffee.
I know.
Let's go sit down and have a cup of coffee.
I'm 100% with you. And so I don't think it's even possible to walk in there and tell the boys, no, we're not having coffee.
Right.
How does that go? Have you tried that?
Yeah, totally. It's more so like, hey guys, can we let's maybe use a little bit of moderation. So instead of drinking a whole pot of coffee each, can I cut after my first cup? I'll have a glass of water, and then after my second cup, I'll have a glass of water.
Okay.
You guys work 24-hour shifts too, right?
No, we don't.
Okay.
We work 2 10-hour days, followed by 2 14-hour nights. Then we have 2 off. Then we do that whole set of 4 again, 2 days, 2 nights, and then we have 6 off.
Wow.
So it's a 16-day cycle that just repeats over and over and over.
And how many guys are in the department?
1,300.
Yeah, it's a good size.
It's good size. We actually have some momentum towards 24-hour shifts. We've got that coming up here. I think at the end of the month, there's a big info session. There's a committee that researched it all, and we're looking at considering it, seeing what the membership wants, if they want to vote for it or against it. What's your shift schedule like that you guys work?
Most of the American or the West Coast departments are on 24-hour schedules. There's a variety of different 24-hour schedules. They call ours a modified Kelly, where it's 1 on, 1 off, 1 on, 2 off, and then 1 on, 1 off, 1 on, 4 off. And then, but most departments have been making a big push to do the 48-96. So you're on for 2 days and you're off for 4 days, which we voted on, and it just went nowhere. I don't think we'll ever see it in our lifetime, but to me, that seems like probably one of the better schedules. It's rougher for the busier stations for sure, which we definitely have, like a paramedic squad station at somewhere like where Evan Hallquist works. I mean, that's a guarantee you're not sleeping for 2 days. But it does seem like that schedule, from every guy that we talk to that's on it, just is better for your health and for your family and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, I don't want to go too far down the shift road. I want to definitely come back to the first 24 to 72 hours and the things we can do better for the encoding of the trauma. But real quick on the shift stuff, the thing that seems to be most obvious now with what we know based on studies and just our own personal experience is that time at home and the recovery is really what matters. So you can really do a few shifts in a row as long as you have a good block of time at home to really recover and get that good sleep. So when you have a shift schedule where you do 1 on, 1 off, 1 on, 1 off, that type of thing, it's actually pretty detrimental because you're never really fully catching up. You're always in a deficit. And I'd be really curious. I can't put it together in my brain right now what you told me your schedule is, but I'd be really curious how it compares to a 24-hour or 48, that type of rotation and where the recovery is in there. But those things are
14-hour night shifts, dude. Yeah.
Right. But with any of this stuff, the peer support or the shifts, you're in a big department, we're in a big department. it's a big, slow ship, and any kind of movement like that it's hard. It takes work. It takes guys that are passionate about it to make it happen. All right. So when you're first 24 to 72 hours, you're in the station, you're giving guys advice. First thing is moderation, which is for cowards, on coffee. That's a joke, tongue in cheek. No alcohol. What are the other things?
Or you're just trying to moderate, right? Because I mean, that's the first thing a normal person is going to want to do if they get off a 14-hour shift. They had a tough call. They probably want to go home and have a cocktail and maybe try to go to sleep or something, And like, I just know that's what the guys do. But I know it doesn't work for me. But I know that is it a cultural thing that you try to just encourage them to just, hey, the stimulants or the depressants is something that we got to avoid in these first critical hours?
Yeah, I mean, culturally it's very difficult, right? Like for you guys, it would be a little bit different because you guys start and finish at 7 a.m. Is that right?
Yeah.
So yeah, going out for drinks during the morning day drinks is a little less common, but for us,
a little less common.
It happens.
We work. Yeah, I'm sure it does. For us, we work those 2 day shifts, and so it's very cultural. Second day shift beers. That's what. After that, you get off at 5 o'clock, and as a crew, a lot of times it's you go and have beers, right? And if you have tough call during the day and you want to go, and lots of guys get pie-eyed and make bad decisions. But part of the education process in sharing about the caffeine and the alcohol is not just that they don't do it. I tell them what happens. So there's a famous book called The Body Keeps the Score, and the author Bessel van der Kolk, I think is his name. I'm not sure if I get the pronunciation right there, but he talks about how caffeine and alcohol within that first window and how the brain processes trauma and encodes trauma is completely different than if they're not on board. And what happens is the body keeps a score, and then you'll get a physiological response come back later on down the road.
Right.
So for example,
delaying it, right? You're delaying the process, right?
Yeah, and the challenge is you don't know when it's coming back.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? So like one of my best buddies, he's actually a guy that I'm doing reintegration with right now. And he won't mind me sharing this, but like he's 21 years on the job, but he had 7 years as a volunteer prior to that. And, for example, traffic fatalities, he was on a volunteer department right near a highway. So, close to 100 traffic fatalities in those first 7 years that he had been to, as an example. A lot of the fires in the volunteer department are much more advanced, so you're getting fire fatalities. His way of dealing with trauma was copious Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
And so he would do that. And now, several years later, he quit drinking about 10 years ago. He's a Christian guy. He's got a radical testimony. Awesome dude. But his body just finally said, "No, dude, enough's enough. We're not going to proceed anymore." And so he'd have things that would come up where he'd all of a sudden, be heading into night shift and feel nauseous or, diarrhea or vomiting and not knowing why. And so then he goes down the road of like trying to figure out what's going on. Do I got Crohn's or IBS or gluten intolerance or something like that? Goes and checks it out. All the doctors are like, "Yeah, man, like everything looks good. Like, I don't know what's wrong. We can't tell what's wrong with you." So then he has to go down like the elimination diet route and be out, don't eat with the guys at the fire hall because, you can't control it, and trying to sort out what's going on. So he had a few years of that, just trying to figure out what's going on, and then couldn't get any resolution. And so then the next thing that he's still coming to work, kind of having these physiological issues, and then all of a sudden he's noticing that he's getting anxiety coming, and now he's getting upset before he's going to work. Or a couple of times he said he actually caught himself weeping on the way to work, and he's like, "Something's wrong. Like this isn't good. Like I shouldn't be heading to work bawling my eyes out." So he had to take a knee, and he stepped back from work for a bit and went to see a psychologist and put in a bunch of work. And then that's where he and I kind of, now that I'm in this reintegration role, we got to do a bunch of that kind of work together to get him back. But he's that exact example of how that having alcohol or caffeine on board when you are going through trauma, your brain doesn't process it correctly. It doesn't encode it. And then his brain probably just said, enough's enough, we're done here. And that's where he's left off with.
Yeah, the brain is fascinating. I think you process things in sleep, right? I think there was this neurologist that I was listening to that said in a traumatic response, like your brain actually will process and clean up some of the thoughts and visions that you might have, hey, I forgot what that happened, and you get some clarity during sleep. And if I can imagine if you're drinking, we know that causes sleep disruptions, and same with caffeine, right? So you're not really ever recovering, you're just delaying the process.
Would it be fair, Dave? I've read that book, but it's been a long time. I actually need to revisit it. I probably read it about 6 or 7 years ago. But the thing that I most often hear when people start talking about post-traumatic stress in particular is the bucket analogy, right? Where everybody, or a cup analogy, where everybody has a certain amount of stress that they can, that it can actually be contained, that your brain can handle. And then eventually you keep adding stressors to that and not dealing with it, it overflows, and that's where the problems come from. But would it be fair to say that if you're processing the trauma correctly up front, even though it exists, you're then not adding to that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So you're dealing with it almost on the front end.
I would say you're definitely on the right path with that. If we want to loop back to what Evan talked about, in his bad night protocol, like that, the number one thing he said on there was a healthy lifestyle, right? And so to your point about recovering from the 24-hour shifts or from busyness at work, is at home being able to get good sleeps and good recovery. Well, it's been proven that in shift workers, typically the actual reason why most guys end up sick or booking off or having a lot of these things that come up is not necessarily the job stress. It's that they've ran out of margin in their outside work, their outside lives. They've either, whether it's relational stress or financial stress, or a loved one who's sick, or they got a side business that they're running and that's occupying a bunch of their extra capacity. And so when we have so much in those buckets, whether it's not just stress, then it makes it much more difficult to cope with something when you get that call at work that is like, essentially it feels like the straw that breaks the camel's back, but it's more a combination of a bunch of things coming together.
Yeah, I'm glad to say that. I've long felt that it's not just a bad call with a kid who dies or something, or the blue house because you lived in a blue house. I feel like it's the surrounding stress in your life, whether it's financial issues in your marriage, stuff with your kids. You've overextended yourself financially, and then you have something. I think it's always been my deal that I seem like most of the guys are pretty okay. I mean, we've seen the worst of humanity. We've seen trauma all the time, and it seems like the ones that it's the straw that breaks the camel's back is when the guy has so much surrounding stress in his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's totally right. And Nole, to your analogy about the bucket and the cup, I heard a really good version of that too from another guy who does first responder mental health podcasting in Canada here, and he referred to it as a trauma backpack. And the way he referred to it that way was, he said that we all bring those stresses actually before we even get to the job. We've got stuff from our lives that we come to work with, and as we add to that backpack, whether it's like grains of sand or big boulders or rocks or pebbles or whatever, that thing gets filled right up, and eventually you have to take a knee. But one of the things that he really advocated for was that we have the capacity and the ability to take things out of that backpack too. It's not like there's no way to drain that, or that we always have to let it overflow. Well, no, there's a lot of healthy things. Like, we'll talk about some of that coming up, but like, if we do certain things to try to invest in our health and well-being, that can lighten that load, or that can remove some of that trauma, or can remove some of those boulders or some of those pebbles or those rocks that are in that bag, so that you're not having to slog along this hike carrying all that weight. The other thing with that too is recognizing a lot of times we might carry that weight, but there's also a lot of guys that will sometimes take on weight that's not ours to carry. So we come out of a call and say it was a terrible kid call, and we've got kids at home, And, you know, where guys will say that hits close to home, right? That's reminds me too much of what my life is like. And so if a guy chooses to hang on to that, however, now he's carrying this extra weight, and at the end of the day, it's not his weight to carry. That terrible, awful, shitty thing is awful for those parents, awful for those families that have to deal with that. But at the end of the day, it's not your kid, right? It's not your loved one. You can go home to them and you can love them and squeeze them and just cherish them as much as you can. But if you decide to carry the weight of that, you're just unknowingly burdening yourself with weight that's not yours to carry. So trying to help guys recognize.
That's a developed skill, I think. I mean, you have time on, Nole and I have a little time on. And I feel like in the beginning, every single one of those full arrest calls or something, you kind of just held. It just kind of like, and then over time, I think it's a developed skill, and I could be wrong. I don't know. I'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts on is that it becomes a little, I don't know. I don't hold on to it as much anymore, knowing that I can't. Like, I think it's subconscious, but I'm like, I can't get emotionally involved in every single call that we go on. And I feel like that's developed over time. But I remember distinctively the first time I had to put a stethoscope on a dead body to see if there was no apical pulse. And I was very weird about that, or touching or looking for rigor or lividity. And now, I mean, I could do it and have a sandwich 2 seconds later. I don't know if that's developed or custom. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
You're just calloused and horrible, Kevin. I'm sorry.
Horrible human, yeah.
I'd agree with you, Kevin. It's absolutely a skill, and you've gained the experience over time, right? And those things that maybe when you first got on the job, you saw things that just your eyes were wide open because it was such a new world, right? So you weren't expecting to see these things, and now you did. And some of those things you feel like you can't unsee. But I don't know about you guys. When I talk to people, people ask me all the time, like, "Oh, you see all these terrible things. It must bother you for so long." I feel like I've developed that skill, Kevin, just like you're talking about, where it's like I can see it, but I don't really see it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I do. Yeah.
I'm able to in the moment, you know, like years ago, I used to do roofing. You'd be up on the roof of a house putting up shingles, and you'd be out on the very corner of like a 2-story roof, and you're trying to get that last shingle on, and you know it's like over one side is like a 2-story fall, and you're leaning out, you're in a really awkward position, but you got to get the job done. And so you would find a way, you know, if I'm looking down at the ground, geez, that's a long ways down. That's going to distract me from getting the job done. But if I focus on the task at hand, I can block out all that other stuff and just get that last shingle on that corner of the roof. Same with, you know, going on a tough call. You know, if you're doing CPR, I'm going to focus all my energy on doing the best that I possibly can to give that patient as high quality care and attention in that moment. And I'm going to try to block out a lot of the other things around them. I'm not going to memorize their facial features. I'm not going to memorize or really burn into my memory the stuff that's happening around us. More so for me, it's like I'm just there to really focus on doing that job. And then I don't know, you know, my wife prays for me every time I go to work, and I feel like God protects me a lot about that, you know, in that sense, that a lot of those things don't get burnt into my memory per se, where I'm able to like let go of it. Would you agree, or what do you guys think?
I do.
Yeah.
I think the only lingering thing for me is sometimes smells, like, oh, the smell of somebody burning, or the smell of vomit in a full arrest, or the smell of death is very distinctive. You know what I mean? And sometimes those smells will either like linger in your nostril or on your, I don't know. That's for me, that's the only thing is sometimes the smells is like, oh, that'll bring me back or trigger me in a weird way where I'll have bad thoughts or something.
That's really
like hold
interesting
on to the visual stuff.
Yeah. That's really interesting because what Dave's talking about there, I do identify with, and I think I do the same thing subconsciously, because there is a way to be there, to be present, to be paying attention enough to do your job, but not to take in all those other external factors that would become potentially part of a traumatic memory, right? Where there'd be those triggers or the memory of the people's faces in the room, which I've certainly done.
Yeah.
But I think that's earlier in my career. The smell thing is interesting because that's probably one of the senses that you can't really control that, right? You can control what you're focused on with your eyes and what you're kind of doing with your brain, but I don't know anybody that can control their sense of smell. It's a little bit too far removed from the controllable parts of your senses. But that's interesting. Something that a captain told me, I don't know how long ago, a long time ago, about tough calls was he said, just remember that we didn't create the problem. Like and it's kind of back to what you're saying, where it's not your burden to carry whatever that traumatic thing is, because as callous as it may sound, that's not your family member, and you're there to do a job. And if you can make a positive impact, awesome, you're going to. Most of the time you do your best and it doesn't come out well. Maybe not most of the time, that meant to be fair, but it feels like that sometimes. So just recognizing in that slight mindset shift of, I didn't create the problem. I'm just here to do my best, and all I can do is my best with what I have available to me. And that was helpful for me. There's still definitely calls where it still gets to me, but I am right there with you, Kevin. I was joking earlier that the full arrest that did, like, I'm right there with you. I do remember the first time I ever had to, pronounce somebody and go through those steps. Like, I can remember that, but since then I've done it hundreds of times, and I don't remember the last time I've done it, because I've learned to let that stuff go.
Yeah.
We've gone way off the reservation.
I want to go back, because Dave, you were talking about
go back.
backpack and some ways to like remove some of those things. I wondered if you could talk about those things you mentioned before, like Evan Hallquist bad night protocol, which I think is great. Obviously caffeine and alcohol. Caffeine is one that I'm taking away from you. Obviously, if there's something going on, I maybe should avoid that, which is, we know we just need to practice. But are there any other things that you can see, like within, let's say, the first 72 hours of something going on, that might be helpful?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, when we're talking, first of all, about lightening that backpack, or trying to take some of those things out, um, some of those good health practices, but also going to see a clinician, you know what I mean? Getting outside, like you guys always talk about, getting in the sun, getting your breath work, some cold exposure, doing hard things, building resilience. Those things, when you're having, a good, healthy lifestyle, that already automatically, like when you take that time to prioritize your health and well-being, that's moving stuff out of that backpack. Even that on itself, right? For stuff that's in there for, deeper down, or some heavier things, and that's usually where, connecting with others, or being in a relationship, or, going to a psychologist or a counselor or somebody that can give you, help you unpack some of those things. Those are ways that you would look to lighten that backpack.
How's the attitude up there for when you do come in, or when we suggest a clinician? Is it something like, dude, I don't want to talk to this guy, or they see you come in and they know he's a peer support guy, or is it generally more accepted that, hey, we need to do some work here?
I know where you're going with it, and I think that that stigma is starting to change a little bit. A lot of, when it comes to talking to guys about going to see a psychologist or a counselor, a lot of my conversation with those guys around that is about digging your well before you're thirsty. So rather than going to waiting till you're in crisis to go find a psychologist, is while you're healthy, or while you're in a good place, that's the time to go out and find that psychologist, or to create a relationship with a clinician. Then any good clinician worth their money is going to give you, at least a 15 to 30-minute telephone interview for free. They're not going to charge you for that. So what I suggest to guys is I have a list of I took years ago a course from a company called Wounded Warrior, and they gave me a list of questions to ask clinicians when trying to, like an interview questionnaire. Here's 10 good questions to ask a clinician, and to find out if they're going to be a good fit. And so what I recommend to guys is if they need referrals, I'll refer them to, 4 or 5 or 6 different clinicians. Say, go call these guys, take the time and set up that appointment while you're healthy, and then find out if it's going to be a good fit. Find out if you guys vibe well. Find out if you have things in common. Because if you don't do that, and you wait until you're now in crisis, like mental health is only getting worse out there, right? Like our society is going downhill. So there's more and more demand for psychologists, but the wait time to get into one is, 2 to 3 to 4 weeks sometimes. It can be a long time. So firemen are stubborn. Most of us, by the time we're ready to say, okay, I need help, I want to go to a psychologist, it's way too late. We should have been there a long time ago. So we're going to settle for whoever can get us in on short notice. And then that person might not be a good fit. That person might be a brutal fit. And so now that guy goes to that one psychologist and it's a crappy experience. Well, what is he going to do? He's going to say, yeah, I tried psychologists. They're all a bunch of quacks.
Yeah.
Not for me. Right. So that's where I think some of the stigma has come, where when it's not a good fit. So I'll often be encouraging guys to try to be proactive. That's what I mean by dig your well before you're thirsty, is go out while you're healthy, get that introduction to that psychologist, find what's a good fit, and then say to them, hey, look, like, this is my career, this is my job. There's going to be some moments come up in the future where I might be in crisis. I might be in a bad spot. Can you guarantee me or lock me in so that I can get priority treatment, just given the nature of my job? And that person, typically those guys, they're going to have some margin. They're going to say, yeah, I can stay late an hour today to get you in, rather than just being some random guy calling them off the street, because you've now got a relationship with them. That probably is going to curry a bit of favor with them, as well as now they know what you were like when you're healthy. And when you present with them now and you're not, they've got something to compare to, a good baseline.
Man. Yeah, I love that. I really like it in the sense in marital counseling as well. It's like, hey, if we waited too long where she's ready to leave, that's not the time to go get marital counseling, And I feel like when you're well, that's the best time to have like open communication. You can work on things. And I think sometimes having a third party is so beneficial in marital counseling. And you're so right. And I think that the time to develop a relationship and just know the nature of our job is that on a structure fire is not the time to say, this is where I'm going to get fit. I'm going to use, no, you have to do the workout beforehand. It's got to be part of your lifestyle. It's part of one of your operations, is to maybe check in with somebody on a monthly or quarterly basis, just to have that relationship. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the difficulty in all of this, whether it's, what you're talking about right now with finding the right clinician up front and doing that pre-planning, or whether it's doing the right things up front with the traumatic issues in your life or on the job, is it's hard to get guys to buy into that stuff, especially if you're the guy where Jack Daniels is working for you or whatever it is in your life. It's hard to go to that guy and say, hey man, you need to do things differently, because in that moment, like, it's working. Right. Or with the psychiatrist, it's like, well, I'm okay right now. So it's difficult to get that buy-in. But it definitely seems to me, in the experience here on our job, that in order to get that buy-in, what you have to do is just, you got to do CE, you got to do continuing education. It's got to be something that you're talking about all the time. And it takes a trustworthy guy, right? I want to balance this and not say things that sound like I'm super negative about peer support that I'm around, and I'm not. But there is an aspect of peer support where there are guys, at least in my circle, that are there for promotional point reasons or for other reasons. And that create it just makes it more difficult, I think. And I think what that means is that for guys like you who are involved, you just have to be more proactive. You have to be more of, who you are, where you're a good dude. You can go on the station and the guys are going to gravitate to you. We need more of that, because to get through to those guys who are using Jack Daniels and it's working, or who don't want to go talk to a clinician early, you just got to keep reinforcing the message. And the more it gets normalized, the more guys will jump on board. And we are heading in that direction. I think I told you the story of my first peer support experience on the job when we were up at Hume. And
yeah, I don't fully remember, but
maybe I didn't. It's something I've talked about on the podcast before. I'll just share it real quick. But this was early on, so 15 years ago. We had a call. It was a full arrest of an infant, and it was super traumatic for me because of my past. But the captain activated peer support, had them come in, and they came in and sat around the table and asked if anybody wanted to talk. And and nobody was in, everybody was out. The peer support thing was still young, and they were just out on it in general. And so it was a really weird kind of awkward experience for me, because I did feel like I needed to talk about it, but I was also new enough on the job that I didn't want to be the only guy to raise my hand. And it was clear that the other guys in the room were not on board. So I kept my mouth shut. I've seen it change. It's a lot more accepted now. And our peer support team has grown and done a lot of training and learning. So it is very different now. It's a lot more accepted than it was back then. And, that's just a change in, say 10 short years. So that is encouraging. And, just a reminder to us that we have to continue to do the work, and that when those things come up, we got to speak up and we got to be an advocate about the right things to do.
Yeah, I think you said a lot of good things there, about the culture, and I think really trying to normalize this kind of conversation, like when it comes to doing that type of good work. And the more, so we start trying to talk with our recruits, even I think you guys call it a tower,
Yep.
or an academy, getting in there and letting them know this is how we're trying to process trauma. This is, getting to see a clinician right out of the gate. Our department recently has made the move to, we have an annual medical checkup, but we've also added in, it's not a mandatory thing, but an availability for an annual psychological checkup at no cost to the members. So they can,
Very cool.
we're trying to tell the recruits, go in your first year and get a baseline set up on both the psychological and the medical. Then the rest of your career, that you can track and see changes that happen over time. And so the more that you start talking to them as they're coming in as new recruits, that you can start changing that culture and start normalizing that conversation. And I think, to your point, Nole, with being the new guy at the table in that setting, as an officer, one of the things we're trying to change or trying to get away from is that old school mentality of you get back in the truck after a tough call and you look over the driver and look at the guys in the back seat. You good? You good? You good?
Yeah,
Okay,
good,
yeah,
bro,
we're all good. Yeah, let's get back in service. If we can get to the officers and start talking to them a little bit about, if an officer is willing to be vulnerable first, that creates space and saves space for the rest of the crew to feel that it's okay to be vulnerable. And so even as an officer, even if you weren't rattled by that, making a statement like, boys, like that call was messed up. I'm feeling a little rattled right now. How are you guys holding up? Something to that effect, right? And just giving room for them to talk and to share. That creates that environment or that attitude of where it's like, okay, no, like we can talk about this. And that probie who maybe wouldn't normally speak up, or you guys call him a boot, that guy wouldn't normally speak up, but now maybe he will, because he thinks, okay, these guys are actually open to, me sharing my thoughts and my opinions. And so if that leader is willing to go first, the other really challenging thing is like, our job, I don't know about you guys, but we've been really proactive in the last few years at getting really good at doing physical decontamination after a fire.
No,
So, do you?
Yeah.
Do you guys have more than one set of gear?
We do. We have 2 sets of gear, and we do have a decon policy, but I think the majority of us are so busy that it's just like, hey, get in service, get on to the next call.
Yeah.
This isn't official, but it's the most ignored policy we have.
Probably.
That's Nole's opinion. It's not official. Sorry.
So like we've been really trying to push that idea of decon, and it varies how much guys buy into it and not. And so, we're trying to do really good job of physical decon, but we have to also get the mindset of doing some psychological decon. So we come back from a call like that, and we're looking for hot spots, things that are stuck on our gear, not so much on our gear, but stuck in our mind. And what can we do to kind of start rinsing some of that stuff off? And so one of the things that we're trying to advocate for as far as a real culture change is, with that decon, we often talk about shower within the hour, getting back, swapping out your gear, getting the truck ready to go, and then going to keep the truck out of service while the guys jump in the shower and get cleaned up. And it's really difficult when you're at busier stations because guys are very much duty bound and feel like we got to get back in service right away. We got to get back out there and serve our community. But you have to look at the mental aspect of it as no different than a physical injury. Like if you come back from being up on a roof and you had something got jammed up or you got nicked up, you got a bit of an injury. Well, you've got a broken leg, you're not gonna go back right in service right away. You need to get that thing set properly. It has to heal properly. And so normalizing that fact that sometimes being exposed to trauma can lead to mental injury, we need to try to attend to that in the short term. We don't want to send people back out there that are broken. So trying to take even an hour as a crew to give the guys some space, some capacity to try to process that trauma so that they're not running right back out for another traumatic call. And now we're just compound interest. We're just making it worse.
Yeah, that's great. I think some of the most beneficial ones I've seen is just the captain said, hey, told the chief, hey, we're going out of service for 30 minutes to an hour. And then just sit around and do exactly what you said, essentially without the whiteboard. Everyone just kind of verbally vomited like what they did on the call or what it was and I think that sometimes that's all they needed. They just needed to get that out. They needed to do it. And then I think as a good officer, as a good captain, if something was lingering, then that's maybe a trigger to pull to try to get the guys some help or maybe bring in peer support or do something different. But sometimes the guys just need to verbally just process what they just did, and sometimes just sitting around the table and hearing everybody's perspective on it is the best way to start.
Totally.
Dave, can we do this? Because we've gone through some of the points that you bring to guys in the first and give them some advice for the first 24 to 72 hours. And at each point, we've gone down an awesome road and talked about a lot of details. But the Evan Hallquist example is perfect, where you got the bad night protocol and we talk through it, but you really just need a moment in the podcast where there's a list. Would you just assume that Kevin and I have just come off a bad call and you've showed up and you just give us your advice for the first 72 hours, the do's and don'ts?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, we haven't hit on the five main things, so I'll do that.
We haven't made it to my favorite one yet.
Yeah, you betcha. So as we would run it is like the peer support's back. I'm back in the hall. You guys come in, and I'm just chatting with you guys. Some guys maybe want to talk about it, maybe don't. And my job really is just to remind you some things that you already know. We've hopefully had this conversation about the alcohol and the caffeine. The next thing is like, your brain is dysregulated. You've just been through trauma. We need to try to help you regulate. You need self-regulation. So we need to get you back to homeostasis. There's 5 things that you can do really quickly in those first 24 to 72 that are going to make a massive difference in helping restore that regulation. And the first is hydration. Second is nutrition. Third is exercise. Fourth is sleep. And the last one, Noel's favorite, is sex.
Oh, you gave it away. I was going to let him guess.
The business time.
That's right. So if we can get and tackle those 5 things in that first short period of time, it makes a massive, massive difference again in restoring homeostasis in our body, restoring regulation, helping us get back and feeling ourselves again and feeling kind of normal again. And so like we can dip into each one of those things, but obviously like you go on a run and hydration, right? So our bodies get dehydrated super fast. We're wearing those superhero costumes. We're out doing the things, right? We're sweating, and then not to mention now we've got a dehydrated brain. So we need to get a good amount of hydration in there. Get some electrolytes going. Try to restore some of that natural fluid in your body, which is going to also help to start flushing out some of the toxins, right? I often think about trauma similar to like you get that lactic acid during a workout and you want to get that flushed out of your body. Well, there's hormones and endorphins that are rushing through your body that are the negative, the fallout of that trauma. And so some of the hydration can really start help flushing some of that as well. Same with the exercise, right? We get our cardiovascular system pumping. We do whether it's a lift or some kind of cardio, we get that heart muscle working and circulating everything through our bodies. Again, that's going to also help flush and help kind of detox some of that out. Nutrition, if we can avoid those sugary sweets, artificial foods, stuff that's not real food, uh, and start putting in some quality nutrients into our body. That's also going to help restore, that homeostasis, restore that natural feeling of the body. And then that pushes us then to sleep, and that's when we do the best restoration, the best healing, right? If we can knock those things out and get to sleep, that's an amazing start. And then if we have a significant other or a loved one, that physical connection, that physical touch, um, and the release, right? Those things are so beneficial for also restoring the natural endorphins, natural hormone work in your body. So that would be, your top 5 things to get done. And then of course those other 2 with the caffeine and the alcohol.
It's fantastic. What's it like as far as you integrating your faith into the peer support realm? I know sometimes that's one of the reasons, or 2 of the reasons I think Nole and I started the Fire Up program, is we wanted to be more proactive, and talk to guys before stuff hit the fan and give them some tools, and to be vulnerable ourselves to show that, hey, there's strong men that have also gone through things, that still struggle, and that we still need help, and encourage that. And then the second thing is that we could share our faith, where sometimes that was not as acceptable on the peer support realm.
I would say that I haven't had a ton of guys approach me through the peer support side of things about faith, but when it's guys that know you, like, I try to live as authentically as I can within the fire hall. Part of the mandate from Firefighters for Christ is to encourage firefighters to live their lives for Jesus Christ. And so I just try to, the way that I interact with crews, the way that I interact with firefighters, the way that I interact with patients, I try to let that be my example, try to let Christ shine through the way that I live. And then, as I build relationships with guys, that more and more of that faith kind of comes out. And that's, I would say, more so, less in the formal peer support setting where the faith has come out. More so it's in a one-on-one relational where guys will call you off shift, or, and they'll ask if you want to go for coffee, or you hear, through peer support, you hear about somebody and I'll reach out to them and connect. Let's go for a coffee, right? Let's go find out. And, a lot of times, where the question comes up a lot of times is a guy who maybe doesn't have a faith. He might say, well, like, I don't understand how do you process this in such a way? Or what do you look to? How do you seem so peaceful after this really difficult thing? And that is like kind of when you get those open doors to kind of say, well, for me, from my experience, this is what has really worked for me. And this is how that has worked for me and what's been beneficial about it. And then if they want to pursue more down that road, then you can go down the road. But I definitely, I'm not trying to proselytize or witness the guys all the time. It's more so just like in true relationship.
Yeah. I find that's I think culturally, or at least down here, it's, we work for the government. So there's not supposed to be any religious talk. We're supposed to be separate from all that. But when it comes to the relational side of it, it's going to be maybe not necessarily accepted in the sense that they're going to just agree with you and jump on board with what you believe. But I've never had a situation where when there's an opportunity to talk about it and you do talk about it in the context of like what you just said, like for me, this is where I'm at, this is what I believe, and this is how this helps me process that. Nobody freaks out about that. And I think what we sometimes envision and what makes guys hesitant to share that stuff is you envision what might happen if you were in the firehouse, the fire hall, as you guys call it. I like that. But especially if you're in a position as an officer and you start, just going after the guys and evangelizing them, just, unsolicited, like that is going to have a response where guys are there are going to be guys that are going to have a negative response to that. But that's not even close to the same thing as you're in a situation, you're talking about it and it comes up and you have the opportunity to say, well, this is what I believe and this is how that affects me. And guys will hear that and they'll take that in, and they may or may not want to know more, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter, but they're not going to be in a position where at least in my experience, where they're going to just tell you, pound sand, how dare you, that type of thing.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that, they're not just in the fire hall, but in society in general, that there's people out there that have been hurt by religion.
Mm.
And I think, sharing with people, if I'm talking to them about my faith, I very much focus on Jesus and how much he has made a difference in my life and how having a relationship with him changes everything. And putting the religious and the rules and those things aside, just getting to know who Jesus is and how much he loves you and how much he cares about you is so much more meaningful and more powerful. And where people will get their back up is kind of if they've had bad experiences with church or bad experiences with Christian people or whatever religion people, um, and then they create stereotypes in their mind and they sort of form these rigid opinions about it. And I feel like very much so, I just want to talk to them more so about what is their heart, like what is behind some of that stuff, and just I try to be more curious in those conversations, like asking questions and then trying to probe and see what comes out of it.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Dave, let me ask you about, I mean, you've been married to your wife, Brandy, for 23 years, I think you said. And I often say, like, hey, the wife is kind of the canary in the coal mine because we can almost fake it at work. You wear a costume, you're on the war rig, and then you're offered like your 6 days or our 4 days or whatever. And then the wife's the first one that sees the issues. Has there been a time in your career where you didn't recognize something that was going on, or maybe that your wife was like, hey, we got to do something different or something's up?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, well, actually, yeah, thinking about some of the episodes that you guys have talked about in the past. During that COVID times, Nole, you went through your battles and kind of shared a bit about that. I had a very similar experience to you, not in the sense that my job was put in jeopardy, but I was reprimanded and put on leave a little bit and had a couple things happen. Um, and prior to that, it was a very tense time, right? And my wife definitely is got an amazing ability to put her fingers on the pulse. To your point, Kev, as far as the canary in the coal mine, and where it really, she kind of just called me out, and she's like, "Why are you being such an asshole? Like
Mm,
you sound like this great guy at school or at work, but you come home and you treat us like trash." And
I've heard
it's one
that
of those things
before.
where
Mm-hmm.
totally you get that thing where you've got the sleep deprivation, you're trying to work through trauma, you're trying to process trauma, and you know you end up taking it out on the people that you love the most, right? They're the ones that are closest to you, so you know what hurts them. And for me, more than anything, just I would get tired and I would get grumpy. And you walk in and the house is a mess, or the kids are doing stuff, and you feel like kicking the dog, and just like you get frustrated. And so my wife called me out on that. And then the other thing that was really, really tough to take was because we have night shifts, my kids kind of got to figuring out after time, if dad has a bad night, it's probably not going to be a good day for us.
Mm.
And so I had a couple times where I noticed my kids asking me, I come home from work and one of their first questions was like, "So dad, how was your night shift? Did you guys
Just
have a
walking on
good night
eggshells.
or
Yeah.
was it?" And they just want to know what kind of day it's going to be,
Hmm.
because is it going to be happy dad or is it going to be angry dad? And so, yeah, to your point about the wives understanding and the kids recognizing that, I found that, yeah, I was getting sort of angry and kind of reacting poorly. And during that COVID time, I had, like I said, kind of like Noel, I got reprimanded for something that really I was just standing for my convictions. And so it took some time off of work. And I used that time to go and actually do exactly what I said earlier. I found a psychologist, and went and met with him a number of times, and he gave me some really good tools to start to apply and just sort of change perspective on some things, and to recognize some of the negative habits that I had picked up and started doing. And then it really also encouraged me to dive into that whole, a bit more of that health and wellness side of things of like, okay, I need to be selfish a little bit to take care of myself, to make sure that I'm able to be fully available and give my best to my family and the people that mean the most to me.
Yeah, that's great. I failed miserably this morning. I got off shift. We got up a few times, and then it's nothing that too crazy, but it was enough for me to be, and then drove home in traffic in LA for 2 hours. And then the first thing on my mind was that I wanted to make like this. I had these fresh berries, and I know I had this protein powder and this peanut butter. I wanted to make this fresh smoothie. It was in my mind the whole time driving home. And I got home, and I cannot find the blender. And I'm like, I said hello to my wife, and I went straight to the kitchen. I'm like, where's the blender? You know? And she's like, are you going to give me a hug and say hi? Obviously, you had a pretty bad night. And there's like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's funny because, you know, the blender at the station or at the hall is at the same place for the last 38 years. It's never moved. And it's just like the littlest thing. Like, I think we're trying to like organize in our brain a little bit of chaotic or something that if something moves in my house, I'm like, what is the problem? You know what I mean? But so I think I need to do that work. But I think I do think that they bear the brunt of some of the things that we see, even if it's not a traumatic call. It's just maybe sleep deprivation or grumpiness, or you worked hard and you're tired. And that I think that sometimes we need to give them grace and explain quite a bit, like communicate. But I don't know if you have any strategies of reiterating. If you had 2 night shifts in a row, do you have a strategy to reintegrate into the family with your 3 kids and your wife?
Yeah, you know what? That's actually a really good topic that I hadn't written down to talk to you guys about, but I think this was also will tie in nicely to this. Um, so our department had something. We had an external contractor that developed a course for us, not just us, but in general that we adopted, and we ran through it as a training module. It was called Before Operational Stress, and there's a lot of really good points in that. But one of the things that I took away from it was this idea of functional disconnection and functional reconnection. And so just like my example earlier about being on the corner of the roof and being able to lock in your focus, as firefighters, the nature of our job, it demands our focus and our attention, and that we cannot be getting emotional on a call. We need to be able to turn off that emotion and block out all that crap that's happening around us and attend to the patient, attend to the victim, attend to the situation at hand, and not be cowering in fear or not be breaking down and crying. We have to set all that stuff aside, and it's functional, and it's to be on task, right? So we functionally disconnect from our emotions in order to achieve the task at hand. And we're all, for the most part, alpha personalities. For the most part, we're all able to do that really well. That's an aspect of a good firefighter, being able to set myself aside because I'm here to serve. What we suck at in general is reconnecting after with our emotions. So like that part earlier when I was talking about coming home and feeling angry at the kids or wanting to kick the dog or you can't find the blender, like you've possibly, Kevin, I'm not going to speak for you, but for myself, I would come home and I'm still disconnected from my emotions. I'm not there, and my wife and kids want to relate on a completely different level than what I'm relating on at work.
Yeah.
And so the best way, so in that training we learned, okay, well, not only do we have to be able to disconnect, we have to be able to reconnect. What's the best way to do that? The best way to do that is through relationship. And so that can be as easy as when you get back in that truck with that captain, talking to the guys about the call a little bit and engaging in relationship with your crew. Like that's one thing that puts us so far ahead of, law enforcement or people that are in like either a medic, whether maybe just 2 people or whether working on their own. We get back in the truck. I don't know what your staffing is like, but we have 4 guys in every truck. So we get back in. Now you got 3 buddies right there that you can start talking to and regain relationship. That's where our black humor kicks in, right? Guys tell a funny joke like, can you believe how bad that guy smelled, right? Or how filthy that hoarder house was, or how many cats are in there, Kevin. I know you like cats.
Oh, I hate those things.
Yeah. So relationship is the best way that we can sort of reconnect with our emotions. And so if you want, as far as coming home strategies, you know, try to do that before you leave the hall, even is reconnect with your guys, you know, give each other a bro hug, whatever you got to do to just kind of start that out. And then intentionally, I know you guys have long commutes, intentionally on your commute now, start doing things that are going to be beneficial for yourself to decompress, to get back into that self-regulation so that when you get in the house, now you know, okay, I'm showing up for these guys. I've kind of processed the stuff that I need to process, and I'm ready to be the best dad, the best husband that I can be, and be able to do that.
Hypothetical question for you. So there's this guy, he works at the fire hall, and he's had a bad shift. He's super frustrated with the guys he works with. It's just been a bad day. He's got an hour-long commute back up to the mountain.
This is hypothetical.
Is hypothetical. Is constant is just like loud blaring death metal in his ears the whole drive. Is that good or is that bad? Like what's the consensus on this?
Well, it depends. I suppose it depends what death metal does for you and how you respond, right?
I'm liking this answer.
Some people might take that death metal and it calms them down. It just gets them in a good place. Other people, it maybe takes them to a place they shouldn't go. I would just say it depends on how it affects you.
Fair.
Yeah. What does it do to you when you listen to death metal?
Well, actually, I really like it. And usually if it's the proper stuff, if it's Sleeping Giant, for example, or maybe some impending doom, it's really positive because the message behind it is about Jesus. So it's awesome. But there are other bands that I listen to that I for sure know I have to stay away from. They're good for crushing deadlifts, but they're not good for a drive home when I have to go reintegrate. I do know that. And it's an interesting thing. I don't want to go too far down this road, but there's an interesting aspect of at least my brain that if I'm kind of in that mode where I'm angry, which happened a lot during COVID, I got super angry during that phase. I kind of want to stay there. Like there's an aspect of it where I do want to put on Knocked Loose, which is just pissed off, and I wouldn't recommend to anybody. But I kind of want to stay in that mode. And I've done enough long drives home and reintegration wrong that I know that's not the answer, which is why I asked the question. But yeah, I'm with you. I wouldn't always say that aggressive music is bad, depending on how you react to it. But you got to be aware of it. You do for sure.
Yeah, I had a therapist tell me that she encouraged me to have no coffee and to listen to instrumental music on my hour and a half drive home.
What?
And it's really frustrating because I think we definitely, I want to be elevated. I want to be like jacked up.
Yeah.
Most of the time, that's me. I don't like, and so I do notice I'm not great at it, but when I do that, I don't come in as hot and don't yell for the blender as hot if I'm like listening to that. And I notice like if I'm listening to any sort of like news or political stuff and I have I'm an a-hole, you know what I mean? Like I definitely need like to do something different on the ride home than just having coffee, no food, and listening to like something that's going to irritate me. I have to do something different.
Yeah, I found out a long time ago. I've unplugged from a lot of the political podcasts and stuff and news, but part of that was because I would come home and that's what I would have listened to on my whole drive, and so immediately that's what's in my brain, and so I come and I check in with my wife, and that's what I want to talk about. Can you believe this happened? Can you believe they're trying to pass this bill or whatever outrage? And lo and behold, she's not interested, and it's not effective. It's not good. So for sure, for me, that's one of the things that I have learned to avoid on those drives home if I want to successfully reintegrate when I get home, which I do generally.
Like I'm fortunate. My commute at best is maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes tops on a busier day. But one of the things that I'm not good at this necessarily, or I don't put this into practice. I don't know where I heard about it, but some guys, even if they do listen to whatever podcast or the news or something that puts them maybe a bit off, one guy gave me advice of like, at least the last thing he does before he goes in and out, he gets in the garage, puts the vehicle in park, and then takes 5 minutes to just decompress there. You know what I mean? Like whether it's doing breath work or doing whatever he's got to do to kind of push away what what he needs to push away so that he can focus on his family. So I'm not great at doing that. I try to just, as I'm driving home, do the decompression, but that's another tool that I've heard is good.
That's good stuff. How did you get fired up on this? How did you get into the peer support realm?
I'd say honestly, it just came about from really being interested in caring for members through that Firefighters for Christ opportunity. I think from there, the relational side of like caring for members and getting to know them better, and then also stepping into like an officer role. So we're a little bit different in the way that our department operates. We don't do a promotional exam or a promotional process the way that you guys do. We're a seniority-based fire department. So just as that big wheel turns, you kind of gain seniority and eventually you get to the top of the mountain. So the last 5 years or so, I've been what's called a firefighter qualified or a senior firefighter qualified. And that qualification is a class that we take. We have to, you go through that process, but then you're now qualified to act as an officer. And so I've been like a substitute teacher for the last 5 years where I'm filling in, at different stations around the city when guys are off on vacation or holiday or whatnot. So it's good in that you get a lot of varied experiences. You get to be on different trucks all over the city, all kinds of different apparatus, and different crews. But it is also challenging because you don't have a home. You may be able to get in station for maybe 3 or 4 blocks, or maybe even a block of 4 months. But for the most part, you're on the move. And what becomes challenging with that is you don't get as deeply into the relationships with the crews because you're on the move so much more. And then you also get the challenge of, okay, I'm on this crew and I don't really know anybody here. What if the shit hits the fan? Who are my go-tos? Who are my guys that I know that are going to be a beast or a savage? And who are the guys that are going to maybe not be tip of the spear? I need this guy doing something else. And so you really, with crews, you got to really try to be quickly to get an assessment of at least a gut feeling of which guys are going to be what, and then you got to roll with that. So it makes us very good at kind of being able to improvise and adapt and overcome. And then on the fire ground, you got to kind of figure it out. But now, I'm promoted to captain, so I've got a position and I've got a home station and a home crew. And so now a lot of those lessons and things that I've been talking about today, I can really put that more into practice. The part of, I guess, stepping into that leadership piece as an officer and acting as an officer, that's where I really I think I more gravitated towards this. I want to be there and be a better leader. I want to be a better captain and mentor to these guys. And as I learned more about, these tools, I really decided this is where I can be an educator as well. So I've been able to bounce around, acting at all these different halls, and I share this information with our guys, and be able to tell them, here's some ways that we can process trauma. Here's how we can get better at doing these things. And so that's one of the benefits, I guess, to getting to bounce around. And that's something that really just developed, I would say, over the last number of years.
Can I shift gears? This is something that I wanted to ask you about when we were at Hume, but we were actually talking about real stuff every time we were talking that was important, so I didn't bring this up. But we're at the end. We're at the kind of what is probably the tail end of this podcast. So I'm going to ask you this question: as a Canadian fire captain, you've had some interaction with us Americans, this American fire guys, or even just Americans in general. Like, what are some things that we do down here that you think are just ridiculous, comical, you don't understand, maybe you think they're stupid? Like, what do you got? You got anything?
Well, the first thing, I won't actually.
Just go for it. Just let it rip. We got thick hides.
We'll start with me first. When you guys talk about the station that you're at,
yeah,
you say I'm at 13s or 33s.
Yes, plural. 66s.
Yeah, like I guarantee there's got to be some history behind that that's kept it going. But what's the deal?
Nobody knows.
Nobody
know,
knows.
Kevin? Do you know?
I I think it's because at some point there was different apparatus. It'd be like in New York, for example, it'd be ladder 19 and engine 33 in the same house.
Right.
And I heard allegedly, and I could be totally wrong. Somebody's going to fact check this, and I hope they do. That was like, hey, I'm at 33 engine, so they call it 33s, but out of station 19. I don't know. So for whatever reason, we pluralize everything. We say no big deals, and we pluralize the station. So no big deals, not no big deal. We say no big deals, and we say I work at 13s. I have no idea. That's a great question.
The fireman I relieved this morning said that to me. No big deals. It is the de facto changeover phrase that you will hear. The funniest thing about no big deals is when the guy says no big deals, and then he goes on to describe the shift, and you're listening to it and you go, those are some big deals, man. Like that was a day.
Yeah.
You're telling me anyway. Yeah, the pluralization thing is a legitimate question, and you get asked that by other American civilians. Like, why do you guys say 66s? Like, what is that? And I've never had a good answer. Kevin's is the closest I've heard, and I've asked around.
No, I can run with that. The other thing I would say I find interesting, listening to your podcast and interacting with Americans is the gun culture. And I found it really interesting, like, when you're talking with a few different guests about your conceal and carry permits.
Yeah.
And, I think you're talking to a certain guy about situational awareness.
Yeah.
And, to the idea of having a gun on me and how I would respond in a situation is completely foreign for me to think about. So I was really interested, like listening to you and how you guys sort of process that or hash that out. And then you look at, I don't know what the exact statistics would be, but the gun violence in the U.S. would be radically different than the amount of gun violence that we see here in Canada.
I'm laughing, just to be clear for the podcast listener. I'm laughing because we can't go down this road, not because it's a funny topic. We would have to do an entire other podcast to have that conversation.
But I could see how that would seem absurd from an outside perspective, because we have so many mass shootings, like it's daily, right? So it's like,
yeah, and it's the type of thing.
No, another thing, I got to tell you this story, Kevin, that you'll probably laugh because you recognize it. But so I sit down with Nole, probably like the end of day one. You guys wave me down. You're like, hey, come sit with us, come eat dinner with us. It was like a really good meal we were having at Hume. It was like some kind of steak or something like that. Was it ribeye or some kind of?
I don't know. It was a giant meat though. Whatever it was, they were carving it off. It was huge. It
was a huge piece of meat, and I sit down next to Nole, and I got my cutlery, and I'm looking at it, like this knife that I got just is not sufficient really. But then I look over at Nole, and he's got the equivalent of like a kitchen butcher knife. Like he's got this massive blade, and he's holding it like daintily, like a proper steak knife, and he's just it's like one stroke, and he's cut right through the steak like butter. And he's got this knife that is just envious. And then at the end of the meal, of course, he pulls out like a napkin and wipes the blade off and
you gotta clean it up.
Puts it
back
holster.
in my pocket. Yeah,
that's because he was a ranger. He's prepared.
I remember the first time I did that, because I don't know what it's like up there in Canada, but down here, you go to an American restaurant, they're going to give you a quote unquote steak knife, but it's basically a butter knife with maybe a wood handle. It's worthless. And I remember I don't remember exactly the scenario, but at one point it dawned on me, I have a razor sharp knife in my pocket. I don't have to struggle through this. And so I pulled it out, and my wife was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm going to cut my steak. She's like, people will see. I'm like, well, so what? Well, so what if they do see? And she's like, well, they're going to, no, I'm not worried about it. So now that's my thing. I do that. And she will then ask me for my knife. This is not a real scenario, but supposing I was eating a salad and she was having a steak, she would ask to borrow my knife. So it's great. It's one more reason why I advocate for people carrying a pocket knife. Like, you should be eating meat. You might as well cut it with the right cutlery. I don't know who makes those knives they give to steakhouses, but maybe I'm going to the wrong steakhouses. They're garbage.
Kevin, I got a question for you.
Oh yeah, hit me.
I know on episodes in the past you talked about you got your daughter or one of them or two of them into hockey.
Yeah.
Wondering how big is hockey culture down where you live?
There's pockets, right? So it's like you'd be surprised, but like the one and only Dave Tebow, who we've had on the podcast multiple, his son is in triple. He just got a AAA team under the Kings, which is the LA Kings hockey team, and so you have pockets. I think there's so many people and so many things that that's why I think American sports in general is such a huge thing. But you're in the NHL playoffs, and I think if you're a hockey family, those guys are all in on hockey, and it's really hard to find ice time, and it's nowhere near as prevalent as it is in Canada, of course. And we have no ice; it's 80 degrees here all the time, so it's a lot of roller hockey for my daughter. But the people that are into it are wildly into it and can tell you everything about it. And I think the majority of people right here are like fair weather friends. We're going to watch the NHL playoffs. If the Ducks are playing your Oilers right now, so somebody's going to watch that. But I think there's too many sports. So it's like football, baseball, basketball, lacrosse, track, like hockey. So it's very niche. But if you're in the niche, you are a wildly raving fan. Like the Tebows are a hockey family, and they're traveling all over the country, including your country, to go play hockey. Yeah.
I will say this about hockey. I can tell you where hundreds of baseball and football fields and soccer fields are. I do not know the location of a single ice hockey rink. I know they're out there, but you could tell me better, Kevin, but I think they're pretty rare.
Yeah, and
That's going to be a lie, Nole.
That's the problem, because you can't, Dave was talking about pond hockey up in Canada, and he loves the cold, and he was in a t-shirt and jeans, and they played until the end of the earth at all through the night on this pond, and he was just having a time of his life. That is not a thing unless you live in Minnesota here, right? So, but yeah, there's 3 rinks. There's 3 rinks within an hour of us, and to find the ice time between that and what do you call it, the figure skating is like, so that's one of the reasons we avoid hockey here, is because I really don't want my daughter, because practice would be at 9:00 at night on a Thursday, an hour away from us. I'm like, we're not doing that. Like, that's your bedtime, So that's that thing why I don't think it is as big, is because the access to it is pretty tough.
Oh, for sure. I like years ago when my kids were heavily involved in hockey, I had a backyard rink. Like I made a rink in the backyard. That's like a thing that happens here. Like
it's a birthright.
You can go to the store and you can buy a backyard rink kit, and you gotta, my yard, the one yard that we had it in was quite a slope to it. So it was like a swimming pool basically. I had a deep end that was about 22 to 23 inches thick, and the shallow end was probably 3 or 4 inches thick.
Wow.
But the kids would come home from school and they go out and they play until dinner. They eat dinner and they come back in and they go back out and they play until bedtime.
That's
just
amazing.
Awesome.
This last winter, I live in Temecula, so Southern California, but they have a lot of wineries, and there's one winery every winter creates like a man-made ice rink. And it's, we live in a desert climate, and so it's really popular. But it's hilarious because I would say 80% of the people that are out there, they make these PVC like walkers because nobody knows how to skate. And I was laughing my head off. I'm like, if anybody from Canada would come up here, they would just vomit in their mouth because how embarrassing it is that nobody knows how to skate here.
Very true.
It's funny. On the flip side, I'd spent some time. I've been up to Vancouver a bunch. I haven't been to Edmonton. I'd love to go. But it was funny. This was many moons ago. There were some loose laws around marijuana and things, and I had a couple buddies that were partaking in some loose laws over there while we was back in college days. And I remember these 2 mall cop dudes came up to us, and they were like the most friendly. I thought they were like just like the security guard of the park or something. They're like, "Hey, how you guys doing? Are you guys lost? Any problems? You need help?" And we were so nervous that it was like some sort of law official, but I'm like, they're not cops. They didn't have guns. They absolutely were. They were the police officers of the town, but I didn't see them have any like weapons or shotguns on them. And so, and they were outrageously friendly. And I was just thought it was like, what a great people. Everybody that we met up there was just so friendly and warm and welcoming. And I just thought they were just great people. But it's just really funny how different it would be, because we're used to working in Los Angeles where everybody hates the police officers, and they have to create a pretty hard shell around them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's probably the hardest job in America, in my opinion. But yeah, what a different interaction.
Totally.
Do you guys? I've seen these videos. It's like in our East Coast, like Chicago and stuff, of like these frozen buildings that are on fire and like the water freezes. Do you have to experience? I just want to geek out on that stuff where you have hydrants that freeze, water that freezes. It's got to be freezing.
Absolutely, man. It's a completely different animal fighting a fire when it's, I mean, I don't know the conversion for Fahrenheit to Celsius when it's negative temperatures, but we'll get temperatures where it's -30, -40 Celsius, and then you've got wind chill on top of that. And so like one of the first, as a pump operator or an engineer, one of the first things you gotta learn is you gotta keep a bleeder open, or you gotta keep a line cracked open so water is flowing.
Through the pump.
Because if you let that water get stagnant for any period of time, it's gonna freeze up.
Man.
And so, one of the worst things, you sometimes have to do is you're on a line and say it's a defensive attack and it's kind of like a surround and drown. And if you're sitting on a hand line on this thing, you're holding, I guess we call it a 65, but you guys would be like a 2.5 inch.
Yeah.
And there's a fine mist coming off, right? Well, you end up being an entire shell of ice, like coated on your gear. Like you are like a
we don't know nothing about this.
And you're frozen to the hose. We once had a crematorium fire in the middle of winter, and we used to have, like, all of our ladder trucks or tower trucks now have they have a bucket on them.
Yeah.
And we used to have aerials which would just have the tip, and so they didn't actually have the platform. And I remember on one of those fires, -30, the nozzle freezes up. And now the ability to articulate the nozzle is not working. So the captain's like, I need you to go up there and manually move the nozzle for me. And this thing's fully extended out, like 100 feet up in the air, and it's -30 out. And I got a radio, and he's like, just go up there and move it, and then just stay there for a little bit, and then I'll tell you if we need to reposition and move it again. And so I was, okay, sure. So literally, I'm up there on this thing, and I'm moving this nozzle back and forth whenever he says to move it. But I literally froze like onto this because you had to keep, like, if I didn't keep kind of making movements, I was going to get stuck, and they would have to bring the whole stick down to get me unstuck.
To break you off the ladder. Oh my gosh!
So I had to look it up. That's negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit for us. So are your regular turnouts sufficient with gloves to fight a fire in these conditions, or do you guys have to prep with other gear? Because I know I sweat my brains off underneath my turnouts on a fire, and I can imagine that would be fairly challenging if it's below 30.
Yeah, typically, you're not dressing a whole lot warmer other than, because the other thing is you're in station, right? So you're in the station and then you got to go out. So some guys will wear, like we can get a base layer that's kind of lighter. And we have also, in the past, we've had heavier base layers. Some guys will wear those. Some guys will wear like wool socks on their feet, but they often get really hot when you're in station. So it's kind of, cumbersome to have to switch back and forth. But what a lot of guys will do is one captain actually told me years ago they used to have wool gloves for fighting fires, and he's like, you wear the wool gloves and then you get them wet, and then you get that ice over top, and then the wool actually stays warm, and the outer shell of the ice over the mitts can keep your hands warm. God. But yeah, there's not a lot extra that you can do. The turnouts are good as long as you're moving and active. It's good. It's when you get stuck, say for example, in a spot on a defensive attack like I was telling you about earlier, or the other one that's tough is if you're stuck in a car accident and you're waiting for, you gotta get the vehicle, can't get the vehicle off the road, so you're waiting for a tow truck or waiting on scene, babysitting something, and you can get pretty cold in those situations.
That's so wild.
My hat is off to you. I have no idea what that would be like. That's insane. But yeah, I've seen those videos where it just looks like ice particles coming out of the nozzle, and like the whole building is frozen on half of it. It's on fire. It's just insane.
It's still on fire. Yeah.
Another crazy one is trying to break up when you get high vol hose, your supply line, when that freezes solid. That's a real pain in the butt. You got to get in a crane truck with a flatbed and come and haul them away in these. We used to have 100-foot lengths, now we have 50-foot lengths, and they're frozen solid. And we'd have to pick up the line and try to hold it up against the exhaust on the truck to try to heat the coupling up enough to be able to disconnect the coupling.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because if you're not flowing water, I mean, that's going to freeze pretty quickly, right?
Man,
that's insane.
That's
for
wild.
sure. So a good operator's got to keep that water moving.
Hats off to you. That's crazy.
Yeah, Dave, I feel like we barely scratched the surface. I'd love to deep dive into this more. I think this is a given that we're going to have you back on, because I think there's a lot of those strategies. I think but one of the things I'm really taking away is the 5 things. I'm going to definitely tell the wife, sex is one of the 5 things that has to happen.
Number 5.
It's on the list.
It's on the list, yeah. And experts know this. So, but yeah, it'd be fun to talk as the culture accepts more peer support wildly, and it would be fun to revisit some of these things down the line to see how things are going. But I really appreciate you coming on, brother.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's been my pleasure, and really feel honored that you're willing to have a simple guy like me come on the show. And I really enjoyed the conversation. It's great to just get that message and that information out there. Nole, I wanted to show you I'm flying the flag today too.
Yeah,
got
buddy.
That
matching shirts.
Nole gave me a shirt while we were at Hume Lake together, Kevin.
I love it. Well,
it was super good to hang out with you up there, Dave, and this was a good conversation. I really appreciate you giving us the time. This has been fun. I am going to close this out, though, because we just got a call.
All right.
Okay, guys.
I'm pushing the button.
This has been the Fire You Carry podcast. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next week.